Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Darren Hood. Welcome, and thanks for taking the time to tune in or watch the podcast on today. A special welcome, those of you that are joining us for the first time. Hello, and hello. We are continuing our Talk Circuit series, and more specifically, we're going to share the conclusion of a set that I did back in 2020 with the folks from Dexignaire in India, where I covered the topic deep dive into the world of UX, where we're just talking about a lot of things associated with UX. And this is so important. One of the reasons why is because there's a myriad of people out there that are presenting a bunch of stuff. They're either talking about how to do the work, and yes, how to do the work is important, but they're actually leaving out a lot of other critical stuff. And a lot of people are leaving out the history. They're leaving out the fundamentals. And so because of that, UX is being shaped to look like something that it is not, setting the stage for a lot of riffraff to take place when you really take a look at it. So we're not going to delay any longer. Let's go ahead and dive into the conclusion. I'm going to back it up a little bit, and then we'll play it all the way to the end of this set. Remember, this is UX, and this is the dedication. This is the reason for this podcast. And that's why it's called the World of UX, because we talk about everything. We talk about how to do the work. We talk about the challenges. We talk about the pitfalls. We talk about how to manage things. We talk about some of the things that are going on that other people will not talk about. And then people get upset because you talk about it, but then they have no answers when people actually run into it. So we're trying to be a full service, if you will. We are celebrating our 5th anniversary right now. We are going to have some new content coming in the not too distant future. So if you're looking for some of that new content, be patient, but please take this stuff in. Some of these old talks from along my way over the course of my career in the discipline. Ready? Let's go ahead and dive right in, shall we?
Next, we want to talk about importance of UX in the industry. And UX has never been more important to the working world today. Back in the late to early 2000s, most UX positions resided at creative digital agencies. You didn't have as many startups, say, as you do now, especially not getting involved from a digital perspective. But it's so important because you have, at one time, UX was predominantly, what we now know as UX, was predominantly in digital spaces, but application to other arenas has been growing. You're liable to find UX, especially because UX and CX are now becoming more intertwined in a lot of companies. UX is being brought in to help. I've actually, in the course of my career, I've worked on a cart that a person used to wheel around in an auto repair shop. That's not digital. I worked on I helped overhaul a customer support communication system. It depended upon some digital components, but that system itself, the entirety of the system was not digital. So UX is actually the different principles that I mentioned are actually pervasive. It can be applied not just to a website, not just to a mobile app, not just to a mobile phone. UX can be applied across a ton of different form factors and modes of engagement. You can use UX to structure the layout in a grocery store. So it's applicable. You have, wherever you're sitting right now, there's a UX that can be applied to that room where you are to make it work better. You can make it more efficient. Remember, efficiency and usability? So efficiency is not limited to digital spaces. It's applicable across the board. So it's important for us to know that. So the importance of UX has never been more important. You might work in a digital arena, but don't allow yourself to be limited. Take the time, and this is something you do on your own. And if you opt into UX, by the way, You have opted into lifelong learning, and you will find that it applies to any and everything. And it's something that you'll find when you're not at work, when you really get rooted and grounded in UX. You'll tend to apply it to all types of different things, even when you're not at work, to parking lots, I was at the local zoo once, and the wayfinding was really, really bad at the time. They fixed it, thank God. But there was a time where it was really bad. Well, UX can come in and fix the wayfinding at a hospital, at a zoo, in a parking lot, things of that nature, especially parking lots at airports. Historically bad, but when you apply UX principles, something you can do to fix it. So the importance of UX, again, has never been greater. This is something that we professionals and those interested in becoming a UX professional need to know and understand, so that you don't limit yourself to a particular arena, because when you limit yourself, you will fail to pursue opportunities in those areas that you may have previously thought to be off limits. So you don't want to do that. UX can be applied everywhere. We have to wait for the occupational world to catch up with that, but it doesn't hurt to be ahead of the curve. So be aware of those things, apply UX, practice it, do it on your own. Don't wait to get hired, do it on your own. And it's something that will help you. It helped me because I did it on my own, and then I was hired and I was doing it to apply it to ergonomics and things of that nature. So I encourage everybody else to do the same. That brings us to the role of a UX designer. With the role of a UX designer, your role, it will vary based upon where you work. And the opportunities that are afforded us as UX professionals will vary based on where we work. And so if you're working at a place and you get to do more information architecture, that's how my career started. I started as an information architect. I was focused on usability and heuristics, making sure that my information architecture was sound. And that allowed me to do work on wireframes and prototypes. Some companies may not let you do much on wireframes and may be more prototype oriented. I worked at a place that did that before too. Some places do more or less research. Some places do more research than others, or engage in different types of research as opposed to others. And then everybody, you get involved in interface and interaction design, no matter who you're working for. But different places allow you to do work in different ways. And so the role of the UX designer is going to differ, always based on where you work, but you're always going to be involved in those 4 pillars, which is another reason why I stress them so much. You're going to be working in those 4 pillars. You're going to be doing more or less work in those pillars, depending upon the type of work that you're doing and depending upon what the need is. There are some people I've even encouraged before that it might be time to move on if you've been somewhere too long and you're not being afforded those other opportunities and you're not doing them on your own. It might be time to move on. If you love your job and it's great, it works for you, fine. But if you're boxed in, which is one of the reasons that I've moved on before, when I was just an information architect, I realized if I want to learn more about UX, I need to go somewhere else so I can get higher on the UX food chain. And I went to one of the biggest digital creative agencies in the world, and it happened exactly as I thought it would. And the best thing that ever happened to me, because of all the experiences that I was allowed to have, I was able to conduct research in ways that I couldn't conduct research before. I was able to work from a collaborative standpoint that I was never able to use before. Then I went to another company later and I was able to collaborate and work with global teams when I redesigned the English as a second language platform for National Geographic Learning. I was working with teams in India, and then there was teams in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and then there was teams out in San Francisco, California. So there were opportunities that were afforded because of where I was. So your role, again, will always depend upon where you are. Take full advantage of it, and then grow as much as you can within that environment, and then you move accordingly. Because truth be told, the life the shelf life of a UX professional at different organizations is not as long as people think that it is. So gain the experience you want and need, and then govern yourself accordingly. Do whatever you need to do, but know that your growth will always be limited by the opportunities that you have access to, that have been afforded to you. The last component, speaking of that, it's fitting that this is the final part of the talk, and that's the career scope in the user experience path. As we stated, this couldn't be a better time to be in UX. It is a challenging time. I don't want to paint this blue sky kind of picture, because there are some challenges. There's something called a UX maturity level. How mature is a company when it comes to UX? How mature? And so I say that, and it factors in with career scope, because as you may be looking for your first UX job, looking for a new UX job, and we tend to look at the job postings, and this is happening all over the world, that job postings are not written very well. So you don't always really get a good bird's eye view of what the job is going to be like and what you're going to do, which means that your interview skills are critical, absolutely critical, because you have to know the right questions to ask. You have to ask certain questions based on the job posting, certain questions based on your research of the company that you're applying to. You have to ask certain questions about the UX team and how UX has been, the UX team has been active or in place at a given organization. And so when we do these things, and we work to understand what our job would actually entail, what type of work would I actually be doing if I was at a given organization, the interviewing skills are important. So don't just be so excited to get a job. Make sure that you are executing the interview there, and they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them also. So make sure that this is the place for you. Make sure it's a fit. And there's a mistake that I've made that I'm going to share with you now. Don't allow a company name to cause you to go blind. Don't be so enamored. Don't be so excited. Oh, Facebook. Oh, it's Amazon. Oh, it's IBM. Don't get caught up in big names, because you'll have a big surprise waiting for you a lot of times when you get caught up with a name, and then you find out that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And you get so caught up with the name that you forget to ask certain critical questions. And then you find out that big name company, whoever they might be, is the worst thing you could have ever experienced in your entire life. So the career scope, there are a lot of opportunities. Some of them, you have to make sure that they're really UX roles. A lot of them are not. They say UX, but they're not. A lot of positions today, they say that they're product, but when you look at the description, it's all UX, which makes you wonder, why is it called product if it's really UX work? So again, you have to ask the right questions. Make sure it's on you. Make sure that you understand what the position calls for. A lot of positions. Doesn't mean that they're all correct. It doesn't mean that they're for you. So make sure that you flush them out. Make sure you get an understanding. Interviewing skills. There need to be classes just on interview skills. We need to do a presentation, a talk on UX interviewing skills, just to make sure that people understand what's going on and how to best confirm the job that you thought was for you. You could find out during the interview that it's not. But you can't be afraid to ask those questions. You can't be afraid to find out and uncover as much truth as you can. And companies that have a poor UX maturity level don't really know how to communicate things about UX during the interview. And it's important for you to know that, so that you don't go in there thinking that you're going to have this great UX practice and find out that it could be further from the truth. I know someone once, me, who interviewed at a company, thought it was going to be great, and they tried to turn me into a business analyst. I didn't interview to become a business analyst. So some companies will bait and switch you. And if that's not, you need to, during the interview, and this particular company, they talked a great UX game at the time during the interview process. But when I found out that the person later, I found out that the person in charge of the UX group had zero UX background, that's a red flag. That's a red flag in most instances. The only time that works is when the person has respect for UX. And that particular person, in my case, did not. So make sure career opportunities abound. Even if you are a new UX professional, they're out there. You have to make sure you're qualified. Don't do like a lot of people today who are lying, claiming that they have UX experience and they do not. Don't be one of those people. You're going to be discovered eventually. And if your resume comes by somebody like the desk of somebody like me, it takes me that long to spot you and you're out of here. If you're interested in UX, you don't have to lie to get into it. Let somebody know that you're new. It may take you longer to get the position, but you'll be happier for it. And the companies that hires you will be happy about it, not throwing you out because they found out that you lied about it. So you want to be legit. You want to be ethical. You want to proceed in a sound and a reasonable and professional manner, and everybody will win in such cases. So folks, that's it. Those are the six topics: the intro to user experience design, the basic principles of UX, the UX design roadmap, the importance of UX in the industry, the role of a UX designer, again, which we sort of described earlier on. It's about finding that sweet spot between UX, the user needs, the business needs and constraints, and moving accordingly based on the different methods and methodologies. That's basically what the role is. And then the career scope, that it's great out there right now, but you got to work through it the right way. So I hope you got a lot out of the talk. Thanks again to the folks at Dexignaire for the opportunity to share these things on today. And thank you, Tavleen.
Thank you so much, Darren. The pleasure is all ours. And I think it's the experience that speaks. I mean, what all you've told here today, what we've learned from this session, I don't think anybody can get anything of this sort on the internet or anywhere around the world. It's just the experience that speaks. Thank you so much. So
My
now,
pleasure.
Darren, we have some questions here in the
Yes.
chat section. So if you allow us to ask, we can begin with them.
Okay. Ready.
So first, Maria asks, where does accessibility testing fit in the process of heuristic evaluation and usability testing?
That is a dynamite question, Maria. Accessibility testing. I almost brought that up, but I knew I would have gone down a rabbit hole. So I'm glad I'm glad that you asked that question. Accessibility technically is a part of heuristic evaluation. It's a part of it. I tend to separate it in my practice because accessibility is so big that it needs to be its own focal point. So it is, you will find it listed as an accessibility piece in many schools of thought, but it is good to keep it separate. And what I have done with regard to accessibility, and there's different ways you can approach it, is there's a browser add-on, my favorite. It's called Axe, A-X-E. It's made by a company called DQ, another Michigan company. I had to give them a quick shout out. Love those guys. And you can add it on to Chrome-based browsers. I don't know if it exists for Firefox or not. You can visit a web page. So we just focus on web page accessibility right now for the moment. And you install the plugin, you turn on the developer or the inspector portion of the browser, and you run Axe, and it will show you. Matter of fact, I have some decks on SlideShare. I have a ton of my talk decks on SlideShare for those who are interested, but I delivered 2 different talks on accessibility. My memory serves me correctly. Both of those talks are on SlideShare, and it walks you through step by step, basically how that one time I talk about it from business perspective, the other time I talk about Axe, and you'll see some of the results, because Axe will show you how many accessibility problems there are how many are critical. It's like 5 different, my memory serves me correctly, 5 different categories of the findings on the page. And not only will it tell you how many accessibility issues there are on the page, it will tell you where and how to fix it. You don't find anything as thorough as what I've seen in Axe. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, sometimes you just need to look at the contrast. That there's a huge win, and a lot of people fail in their accessibility approaches just because they fail to include the proper contrast. So if you use something like the Web AIM contrast checker, and you can plug in the foreground and background colors, it will tell you whether it passes AA or AAA standards associated with accessibility. So if your contrast doesn't pass, then you can actually just drag the slider and find out what color that might be similar to that will pass the accessibility guidelines for AA and AAA, and then you can make the changes accordingly. There's also different websites out there that you give them the URL, it'll come to your page and tell you what's going on. I mean, there's so much. Figma has accessibility plugins. UXPen has accessibility plugins now. There's ways to tell on the spot whether or not your design is accessible. But please note, they're usually talking about contrast. They're not telling you about a lot of times, Axe will tell you whether or not your assets will work in a screen reader. Whereas the Web AIM contrast checker will not. So be aware when you're looking at the different tools out there that some of them are going to delve deeper into accessibility points, and some of them are going to be more on the shallow end. So the arena of business that you're working in, I'm in education, accessibility is extremely critical because we need to make sure that things are accessible for everyone. So you have people who are blind that are students. You need to be able to make things available to them, resources available to them. There are other people that are colorblind. Some of the different contrast tools from that perspective will help with that. There are even tools out there that will simulate different types of color blindness. So that's how you handle accessibility. Again, it's so big, I do it separately. Because you can bring up accessibility at the same time as your standard heuristic analysis findings, and people will be so much content will come up on the accessibility side that it will dwarf and eventually overshadow the other heuristic work, and now your efforts are going to cannibalize themselves. So I found it's wiser to separate them. Do accessibility, give your accessibility report separate from your heuristic and usability report, and you'll find that your stakeholders, because you don't want to give them too much cognitive load with your findings either. So by separating them, it becomes easier and it becomes more efficient for you as well. Thank you again, Maria. Awesome question.
Thank you, Darren. So we've heard this question a lot of times about difference between user interface design and user experience design. And also we've had a discussion about it. And so there are many beginners who are asking this question continuously. So how would it differ between interface design and experience design? For example, if we talk about the interface that YouTube that we're streaming on. So I think we can take it as an example and explain what UI here is and what UX is, if that's
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. The experience is everything. The experience is holistic. It is, that's why, as I mentioned, it's UI. UI is a subset of UX because it's only talking about the interface. But there are a lot of things that are going on that are beyond the interface. Cognitive load, it could be related to the interface, but it actually is more dependent upon the other principles. The UI is where is the button? You know, which of these things are related? That there's your gestalt, what's known as gestalt principles, because things that are closer together are assumed to be related. So that's an interface element. It taps into usability. It's related to information architecture, but it's mostly a UI thing. So how are things laid out? What colors are we using? Are we using rounded buttons or square buttons? Are we, how have we executed our active and inactive states on certain buttons? That's UI. And how we plan on doing that. I would even venture to say that a lot of elements associated with UI design, a lot of people who say that they're into UI don't even realize that it's just UI. There's so much that's interface only. The fold, which for years people would say, got to make sure it's above the fold. Well, number one, it was proven that the fold was a myth, and that it's not about that. And matter of fact, you can make sure that to cue people in and let them know that there's additional content. All you have to do is design your interface to make sure that that content is peaking. Don't make them dependent upon the scroll bar, because only expert users can tell there's more content by looking at the scroll bar. Your lower 25 percentile, which I was always taught, if you want to make your design successful, make sure it appeals to the lower 25 percentile of your user base, not your expert users. Appeal to the less skilled users, and everybody will win. Don't leave them out. So if you make sure your content is peaking at the bottom of the screen, everybody can see that, and they're going to see that more than they're going to see a scroll bar. So if you make sure that your content is peaking, forget about the fold. Just make sure that information is peaking, and then they know it's there, and they're going to start scrolling. Once they start scrolling, they'll continue scrolling. They know that content is there, and once they know the content is there, instead of being cut off and making it look like everything is there within that one screen, they know after they start scrolling that they know that the cue that the page has ended is that you see footer content. That's interface design. How did you decide where to put the footer? How did you decide, not just information architecture, but this is interface design. Did you decide to put utility navigation, include that in the interface? Or did you do, like I see some people, what should be the utility navigation, the upper right, ends up being the global navigation? See, there's utility navigation there, and this is information architecture, where there's an overlap between the IA, as we call it for short, and interface design. There's utility navigation, there is global navigation, there's local navigation, there's inline links. How did you then there is your asides, your related content that you're deciding to put there as a cross-sell item, or just something related navigation just to help somebody along and to give them additional options. Because you never want to have, if you have a dead end experience, it's because you can come to a page and the person goes through the page and then that's it. Thanks for coming. That's basically what your page is saying, because you provided no next steps, no additional related information. If you're interested in this, you might also be interested in this. So you have to put that on the page. If not, if you don't include next steps, your page is what we call a dead end. And so now that's UI. You've provided a dead end, and now people are sitting there and they don't know where to go. They just read your information and looking around, and the experience ends in many cases, and they can get to the URL bar just as easily as they can click something. Matter of fact, it's easier to click something to go somewhere next. So provide them clues, tips, be courteous. That's I haven't seen a lot of people say that. I include courtesy as a part of usability in a design, because the more courteous you are, the more you are likely to delight your users. So have you really been courteous, or is your design rude? If your design is rude, it's not going to work. People are going to get upset, and there's something called an annoyance threshold. If you annoy people too much, at a certain point, they turn off and they're done with you. And they have another alternative out there, and they will go to the alternative if you force them to. They found you. Take advantage of the fact that they found you. Be courteous. Make it usable. Make it valuable. Make it enjoyable. And they'll stay. We used to call it making it sticky. Make the design sticky. So that there's some of your differences between UX, and I was going back and forth. But UI is just the interface. But the experience, the cognitive load, we need to reduce the cognitive load. We need to change the way that label doesn't make sense to a lot of our users. Never use a buzzword in your, this is a standard rule. It's a heuristic rule that you never use a buzzword for your company in your navigation, because people, you might know it, your team knows it, your users do not. So there's your overlap again between usability and heuristics, information architecture, and interface design. So in my interface design, we need to execute it this way. The contrast, going back to accessibility again, the contrast. Some of you may not remember this thing called GeoCities. If you've never seen GeoCities, go to images.google.com and type in GeoCities, and you'll see a whole bunch of images that shows you. It was the first, one of the first free website resources available on the internet, and practically everything out there was ugly. It was god awful ugly, and you would see purple backgrounds with pink text and things like that. That was a terrible contrast. Sadly, some people still doing it. I know you've all seen Ling's cars, where the clutter. That's interface design. He does it because people come out there because they know that his design is said to be one of the most ugly in the world. Arngren is another one. They're said to be two of the ugliest websites in the world, but they do it to get people to come to their site. But the design is awful because it's cluttered. That's interface design. It's bad interface design. It's really bad interface design, but you don't want to have clutter. So choosing to eliminate clutter, that's a UI technique, but it's also related to, it's very, you always have a lot of times overlap, but yeah, UI is a separate thing. And it's usually referred to early on. A lot of people that are now UX designers were called UI people, but leaving it where it is, UI design is really about just the people who make it look pretty at the end. Frankly, that's really what it's about for the most part. All of the scientific aspects of it is all UX. All of it. So there's another different, UI is art. UX is science. With a heart for art, but it's mostly the science.
Yeah. Obviously, with so much competition in the market, I don't think the customers are going to give second chance to anybody. So if they don't like their that's actually a tough call. Okay, so the next question is by Muskan. She asks, how competitive is UX design, as in what all steps we need to take care while stepping into the design discipline?
Oh, how competitive is UX design? I say it's extremely competitive. And I'm thinking this is from a career standpoint. It's different than other design disciplines for this reason. UX as a discipline is only about 20 years old, 20 to 22 years old, about. Going back to the, Don Norman was the first person called a UX designer in the about 93 to 95. I can't remember the exact year, but it's right in there. People were not called UX, didn't have UX in their title until almost a full 10 years after that. What we know as UX, though, is extremely competitive, but it's not for the reasons that you think. It's mainly because, and this is going to be a downer, but I tell my students the truth. I tell my mentees the truth. I'd rather you know than to be surprised and not to have a recourse. It's very competitive today because it's overrun with unqualified people who are getting jobs at companies that know little to nothing about UX. So as a result, even somebody like me will have a hard time, and has had a difficult time finding a UX position that I can be proud of and happy about, because, and don't even get the interview in a lot of places. I have applied for jobs before where it looks like they looked at my job description or looked at my resume and wrote the job description. You would think that I was perfect for the job. I couldn't even get an interview. I have interviewed Facebook, I'll name them. I interviewed at Facebook for a position, interviewed by a person who had a tenth of my experience. and couldn't relate to half of the things that I was saying. On top of the fact that he probably didn't have any real interview skills, and it was all checklist oriented as opposed to being done from a perspective of skill. And so I couldn't get past the second interview, but I know somebody else who had that much experience. Not only do I have the research experience, not only is my research experience broad, I teach research. And I couldn't get past the second interview, and he was on his fourth. So there's people who don't like seniors because they think that they consider us gatekeepers when we're really actually trying to help people to learn the discipline accurately. Just like doctors and other disciplines are helping people who are juniors to come up and do things the right way, which is good not only for the individual, but it's good for the discipline. And someone who's been around as long as me, I do care about the discipline. I know other people who are just like me care about the discipline, trying to help people do things the right way. And so a lot of these people, it's hostile for people like me, frankly. It's hostile because people don't say, wow, this guy really knows a lot. I can learn a lot from him. Man, he could really bring a lot of value to our team. Instead of saying that, oh, he knows more than me. Oh, making me look bad. Oh, I don't know. I actually had somebody once say that it was hard to work with me, but the person never worked with me. So how can you say that it's hard to work with me if we never worked on a project together? This is, and somebody else who had the same makeup as that individual believed it. And the next thing you know, I'm getting called into somebody's office over something that never even happened. This person they sat there, imagined something, and then went and told somebody what they imagined. And I got called into my team lead's office to respond to someone else's paranoid delusions. It was, and instead of saying, man, I can learn a lot from him, they decided to attack. So all of those things, so all that stuff plays in. And I see like people like Maria just said, amen, hostile. I know Maria, she knows about it. I mean, it's like when we came up in the discipline, the people who were our seniors, we embraced them and we learned from them and we asked them questions and we listened to what they said and we valued it. Today, a lot of us, I used to wonder why a lot of seniors are consultants, and I found out. So it's competitive, but it's for all the wrong reasons. And I can only encourage you, let you know that it's out there, and encourage you to continue to develop the right way, trust the system, and continue to grow. And don't let the things that you will experience things in UX. I have labored with people to get people to stay in the discipline because they were so frustrated and wanted to walk away. One person, I couldn't stop him. He did finally walk away. He walked away, he left LinkedIn and everything. And we talked and I convinced him to stay for a while, but he couldn't do it. He got tired of it, trying to compete with people who had no competitive factors. They had nothing to compete with. So they played it to their favor and they won. And now they're still here and he's gone. So it's competitive, but it's for all the wrong reasons. But don't let anything discourage you. I have 2 UX related master's degrees, so I'm sort of stuck. I'm here. But there have been times I have wanted to walk away from UX because it really gets painful. But we weather the storm and we keep going forward. I'll stop there. I hope that helps. I know there's a lot of questions. I want to make sure we can get to all of them.
We have a lot of questions. So the next one we will take up from the chat itself. Okay. And as you said about the competition as well, I think there should be healthy competition when we're talking about. Nowadays, competition leads to intimidation, that leads to mental stress and people leaving, as you said. That's really disheartening.
Costs companies millions. It costs companies millions in attrition.
Yeah, actually. Okay, so moving on. What's the difference between, again, user experience and customer experience? Here we have. and how to design for a better customer experience?
Another fantastic question. And some of you may have seen some of my talk. I have a Venn diagram for this as well. And I'm going to be talking about this on my podcast. Again, I got another plug for the podcast, but there's something that I call the experience landscape, and it's composed of brand experience, which is something you don't design for. It's whatever people, whatever they walk away, how they feel about your brand. But there is an equation. And so BX, UX plus CX, or LX, which is what I do now full-time, or learning experience. That's the application of UX and CX in learning space or academia. So that's what LX is. But BX equals UX plus CX. UX is a subset of CX, just like UI is a subset of UX. UX is a subset of CX. It's in CX. CX is always talking about the engaging with the solution. CX is broader because it's end to end. It covers your first exposure. When you see a commercial on TV or on the web, that's CX. That first experience you have with the brand, all the way through the purchasing funnel, all the way through the customer support funnel, and back into the purchasing funnel where you go back and either get another product or service from that same brand, or it's time for you to upgrade what you already did. CX is this circular, continuous experience that encompasses the entire brand, and it's made up of touch points all along the way. We can talk about touch points in UX as well, but CX is really focused on touch points and looking at journey maps. We use them in UX today, but they actually, journey maps and experience maps both found their first footing in the world of CX. So I've been incorporating CX into my UX practice for the last 5 years or so. And you make sure to be aware of the entire thing. I used to work at Bosch, and Bosch at the time approached UX from a CX perspective. That's what opened my eyes. I was already doing it. And when I saw them practicing it, I got excited. And you start to look at and being considerate about everything. That's where I redesigned the customer support experience for people that had already brought the products. And that was me applying UX to the CX part of the business, melding the two and then bringing them together. I actually showed somebody that in an interview I had once, and they laughed at me because they couldn't even relate to what I was talking about. But it was that's what the CX part is. And it was very UX centric. And we were able to overhaul the entire thing and reduce the number of emails that went out, shorten the emails, add different related elements to add value to the emails that went out to customers. These were all CX based practices with UX coming into the play or into the fray and helping to drive a better overall customer experience. Not just looking at how they use the website, how they use the mobile app, how they used one of our handheld diagnostic tools. It was more inclusive. It's broader. So CX is broader. It touches areas that UX has never touched on traditionally at all. And in many cases, and many companies never will, especially if they have dedicated CX personnel. They will handle that. So that's the difference between the two.
So we have a lot of questions still remaining, but taking into consideration the time, we'll be mentioning Darren's LinkedIn profile so that you can reach out to him and ask him questions right there. So now I'll move on to the last question. So talking about your certification, Darren, from the Nielsen Norman Group. So how can you say that's how important it is in the life of a designer professional, and and how would you recommend people to work towards it who are aiming at for doing the certification in time soon in the future?
Okay, so is everybody ready for everybody ready to be disappointed? I do indeed have I'm a certified UX manager through Nielsen and Norman Group. I have never benefited from my certification.
Okay.
Ever. How's that for disappointment? The certification arena as it stands today is how can I say? In short, it is my opinion, that is my expert opinion, that it is grossly overrated. It's something we do need, but it's not standardized. This is what happens in Nielsen Norman Group. And I hope nobody gets in trouble for this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. That's sort of what I do. I'm the bubble buster guy. I'm the guy that says the stuff that most people who have my experience are afraid to. So I sacrifice myself for the community, essentially, and tell you what they want. And it's that you take X number of classes, and then and you cannot take the test without taking the classes. So know that. No classes, no certification. You take the classes, then after you take the classes, you take open book tests, open book multiple choice tests, and if you pass the test, you get the certification. How much is that worth anywhere else in life? What does that prove about you? It proves that you took the classes and you passed the test. I have worked with people. Not only have I not found that it's not beneficial, I love going to the classes. The exposure to learning resources is many times is fun, as long as it's designed properly. And there's another shocker: a lot of design resources are not designed properly. And remember, I'm about to become a PhD in educational leadership. I'm not just a UX practitioner, I'm an educator. And a lot of people can't say that. And even when they try to, they don't have the same background that I do. I'm telling you, a lot of educational resources that are available are very subpar, and they are to be avoided. Medium should be avoided. There's another one where you just go, because we get a lot of education by just going and reading an article and think that we're going to learn something about UX. Medium should be avoided. There's very, very few resources on Medium that are valid. Very few. And to the point where it's like, forget it, I'll get it from somewhere else. There are no editors on Medium. People publish what they want. And a lot of people who publish on Medium are publishing it because they're in like a boot camp, which is usually a bad resource, by the way. They're usually in a boot camp that requires them to write an article as part of an assignment. So a lot of people who are writing don't know what they're talking about. They're just writing because somebody told them to. They're not writing because they're trying to give back to the community. They're writing because somebody told them to. And I read an article about design thinking yesterday, and it was grossly incorrect. This particular one was not on Medium, but it was grossly incorrect. Everybody needs to learn design thinking. That's not true. No, you don't. All designers know about and practice design thinking. No, we don't. Matter of fact, if you look at design thinking, as I said earlier in this talk, the process in design thinking is we were already doing all that stuff and we were doing it better. So what are you really bringing to the table? Nothing. And now you've got people that are not designers helping to do the design work, which you just devalued yourself and you just discounted the discipline all in one fell swoop. So it's this design stuff is bad. But anyway, I would, because of the way that particular certification is executed, I no longer endorse it. I have it, but I don't endorse it. I'd rather have the HFI certification, although I think the testing process might be different, but the learning content has more, it's more valid to me. So yeah, certifications, you're better off going to Coursera and taking the University of Michigan course in design and research. That's where I've been sending people. If you can't do a master's, and even if you want to do a master, you have to vet that out too, because all master's programs are not designed properly in UX. So hate to have to tell you, but I'd rather tell you than have you not know, and I'd be wrong if I didn't tell you.
Thank you so much, Darren. Otherwise, we would have gone in the wrong direction. And there's so many people who are actually working towards it. But I don't think say that's wrong. But again, we've had we actually know now that what certifications can do, and it's just that blindly running behind certifications is also not the right way to learn.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Darren. With that, we wrap up the question.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to check out the podcast today. We hope you enjoyed that set from the folks at Dexignaire, where I talked about a deep dive into the world of user experience. Before we sign off today, just want to remind everybody we are in the midst of a subscription drive. We are trying to reach 500 subscribers on our YouTube channel. Does the podcast benefit you? You enjoying the world of UX? You enjoy the content we're putting out there? You enjoy the talks that we've been delivering around the world? We're just asking folks for that old like and subscribe. Go ahead and click on that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube because we are being restricted from doing certain things on YouTube because we do not have a certain number of subscribers. So help us out today, if you will. If you're willing, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. Let's get to 500. We have not been making any progress as of lately, but I'm still going to keep asking. So, but that's it. We're going to go ahead and sign off here today, bringing some new content on next week. Until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, signing off. Happy UXing, everybody.